Everyone thinks top Korean students are simply born smarter, but that's not what separates them. Some study 12 hours and fail. Others study fewer hours and consistently rank at the top. After analyzing interviews from high-performing Korean students, study vloggers, and evidence-based learning techniques, one pattern appears again and again. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. In this video, you'll discover 7 habits that repeatedly show up among top performers. Stay until the end because the final habit is the one almost nobody copies, and it may be the most important. 1. They win the first 10 minutes. Most students lose the battle before they've even started. Think about your last study session. You sat at your desk, opened your notebook, then you checked one notification, maybe replied to a message, watched one short video, adjusted your chair, sharpened your pencil. Suddenly 20 minutes disappeared. You weren't studying, you were preparing to study. Top Korean students understand something different. The hardest part of studying isn't hour number 3. It's minute number 1. That's why they never wait until they feel ready. Instead, they make the first task almost impossible to fail. They might review yesterday's notes for 2 minutes, solve 3 easy questions, rewrite 1 important formula, or test themselves with 5 flashcards. It sounds too easy, and that's exactly why it works. When you complete a tiny action, your brain shifts from thinking about studying to actually studying. Momentum begins to build. 3 questions become 10, 10 become 30. Before you realize it, you've been focused for nearly an hour. Notice something important. Their goal isn't to study perfectly. Their goal is simply to start. Because once you've started, continuing becomes much easier than beginning. So tonight, don't promise yourself you'll study for 5 hours. Promise yourself just 1 page, 1 formula, 3 questions. Winning the first 10 minutes often decides the next 2 hours. 2. They learn by retrieval, not rereading. Here's a question. How many times have you read the same chapter, reached the bottom of the page, and realized you don't remember anything you just read? Almost everyone has done this. It feels productive because your eyes are moving across the page, but your brain is doing very little work. Top Korean students study differently. Instead of reading a chapter 5 times, they close the book. Then they ask themselves, what can I remember? At first, it feels uncomfortable. You forget definitions. You mix up formulas. You realize how much you don't know. Most students see that as failure. Top students see it as progress. Because every time your brain struggles to recall information, it strengthens the memory. That's why active recall consistently outperforms passive rereading in learning research. Imagine trying to build muscle. Would lifting an empty bar make you stronger? Of course not. Your muscles grow because they experience resistance. Your memory works exactly the same way. The struggle to remember is what creates stronger learning. That's why many Korean students constantly quiz themselves. They cover the answer, write everything they know, then compare it with the textbook. The goal isn't proving they're smart. The goal is finding the gaps before the exam does. Next time you finish a chapter, close your notebook. Take a blank sheet of paper. Write down everything you remember. You'll probably discover that 5 minutes of retrieval teaches you more than 30 minutes of rereading. 3. Mistakes become a personal textbook. Most students hate making mistakes. Top students collect them. Imagine 2 students solving 100 practice questions. Student A gets 90 correct, feels confident, moves on. Student B gets only 70 correct, but spends an hour studying every single mistake. A week later, who remembers more? Usually student B, because mistakes are some of the strongest teachers you'll ever have. High-performing Korean students don't just mark an answer wrong and forget about it. They keep something called an error log. For every mistake, they ask themselves, why was I wrong? What concept did I misunderstand? What is the correct way to think about this problem, and how will I avoid making the same mistake again? Over time, this notebook becomes incredibly valuable. It isn't filled with everything they know. It's filled with everything they almost forgot. And that's exactly what needs the most attention before an exam. Think about it. Your future exam is much more likely to ask something you've misunderstood than something you've already mastered. That's why reviewing mistakes often gives a much bigger improvement than solving another 50 random questions. Every mistake contains a lesson. Top students simply refuse to waste it. 4. They study in layers. One of the biggest mistakes students make is believing that understanding something once means they've learned it. You watch a lecture, everything makes sense. You solve 2 or 3 questions, and suddenly you think, okay, I know this chapter. Then the exam comes, you stare at the paper, and somehow your mind goes completely blank. Why? Because understanding isn't the same as remembering. Top Korean students know this, so they never try to master a chapter in one sitting. Instead, they study in layers. Think about building a house. You don't paint the walls before laying the foundation. Every stage has a purpose. Studying works exactly the same way. The first pass is simple. Just understand the ideas. Don't worry about speed. Don't worry about difficult questions. Focus only on asking, what is this concept trying to teach me? Once the concepts make sense, they move to the second layer. Practice. Now they solve questions slowly, not to finish quickly but to understand why each answer works. If they get stuck, they don't panic. They go back to the concept, fix the misunderstanding, and try again. Only after that comes the third layer, timed practice. Now they're training under exam conditions, not because speed is more important than understanding, but because pressure changes everything. Question you can solve in 5 minutes at home might suddenly feel impossible during an exam. Timed practice teaches your brain to stay calm under pressure. Finally comes the fourth layer, the one-page summary. This is where they compress an entire chapter into its most important formulas, diagrams, mistakes, and shortcuts, not because they expect to learn from it, but because creating it forces them to organize everything they've learned. And that's incredibly powerful. Every time they revisit a chapter, the memory becomes stronger. The concepts become clearer, and by exam day, they're not seeing the chapter for the first time. They're seeing it for the 5th or 6th time. That's why it feels easy. Most students try to learn everything in one sitting. Top students understand that mastery is built layer by layer. 5. They protect deep focus. Here's a challenge. Count how many times you check your phone while studying. Most people think it's only once or twice. In reality, it's usually dozens of times. One notification, one quick reply, one glance at Instagram, one short video. None of those seem dangerous on their own, but together, they completely destroy your concentration. Every interruption forces your brain to reload the task you were doing. It's like trying to sprint while someone keeps stopping you every 30 seconds. Eventually, you stop making progress. Top Korean students understand that focus isn't something you're born with. It's something you protect. When it's time to study, the phone goes away. Not face down, not on silent, away. Because if it's within reach, your brain is constantly wondering whether something more interesting is happening. Then they choose one subject, one goal, not chemistry, physics, and math all at once. Just one clear target. For the next 45 to 60 minutes, that's the only thing that exists. No multitasking. Question you can solve in 5 minutes at home might suddenly feel impossible during an exam. Timed practice teaches your brain to stay calm under pressure. Finally comes the fourth layer, the one-page summary. This is where they compress an entire chapter into its most important formulas, diagrams, mistakes, and shortcuts, not because they expect to learn low. And here's the surprising part. 45 minutes of uninterrupted focus often produces more learning than 3 distracted hours. That's why the world's highest performers don't always study longer. They study deeper. When your attention stays in one place long enough, your brain starts connecting ideas. Patterns become obvious. Questions become easier. And learning becomes faster. So before your next study session, ask yourself one question. What is the one thing I want to finish before I stand up from this chair? Then remove everything else that competes for your attention. 6. They plan backwards. Most students plan from today. Top students plan from the exam. That sounds like a small difference, but it changes everything. Imagine your exam is 3 months away. An average student might wake up and think, what should I study today? A top student asks a completely different question. What do I need to know by exam day? Then they work backwards. If the exam is in September, what should be finished by August? If August has 12 chapters, how many should be completed? Each week, if 1 week has 7 days, what must be finished today? Suddenly, every study session has a purpose. Instead of randomly opening a textbook and hoping for progress, every hour moves them closer to a specific goal. This also reduces stress, because uncertainty creates anxiety. When you don't know what to study next, your brain wastes energy making decisions. Top students remove those decisions before they even sit down. When they open their notebook, the work has already been planned. All that's left is execution. Planning backwards doesn't just make studying more organized. It makes consistency much easier, because every small task feels connected to a much bigger goal. 7. Discipline replaces motivation. This might be the biggest difference of all. People imagine top students waking up every morning excited to study, but the truth is much less dramatic. They get tired. They feel lazy. They get bored, just like everyone else. The difference is that they don't expect motivation to save them. Motivation is unpredictable. Some days it's there. Most days it isn't. If your success depends on feeling motivated, your results will always depend on your mood. Top Korean students replace motivation with identity. They don't think, I need motivation to study. They think, I'm someone who studies. That's a huge difference. When something becomes part of your identity, you stop negotiating with yourself. You don't ask, should I brush my teeth today? You just do it. Studying becomes the same kind of habit, not because it's exciting every day, but because it's simply what they do. That's why consistency always beats intensity. A student who studies 2 focused hours every day for months usually learns far more than someone who studies 12 hours once a week. Small actions repeated consistently create extraordinary results. And that's exactly how top performers think.